Welcome back to our channel where we share with you the most amazing stories from all over the world. Today, we have a very special treat for you. We will be sharing with you a story of kindness from a good Samaritan who helped a homeless man in need. This story is sure to warm your heart and remind you of the importance of helping those in need. So make sure to watch this video until the end to find out how this homeless man's life was changed forever. The man in the video is known as Rodney, and he has been homeless for more than 10 years. During that time, he had to deal with people's nasty comments about his appearance and listen to their complaints about how he smelled bad. But there were also some good people who showed up offering him food and water. The problem was that Rodney's beard was so long that it made it difficult for him to eat the food these kind people offered him. One day, a good Samaritan approached Rodney while he was sitting by the road asking for some money. And when Rodney realized who the person was, he started begging him to cut off his beard. This man knew that Rodney needed help and he wanted to do something that would make a real difference in his life. So he decided to offer him more than just a handout. He wanted to help Rodney get back on his feet and start living a more normal life again. And even though Rodney initially refused, the man insisted and even brought in some barbers to help him. Rodney finally agreed, but not before telling the man that if anyone else tried to cut his beard, he would bite them. The man understood that Rodney had been through a lot and that he was probably feeling vulnerable and scared, but he was determined to help him. After the haircut, Rodney looked at himself in the mirror and couldn't believe what he saw. He had never seen himself without a beard before, and it was a strange feeling. But the man told him that he looked great and that this was just the first step towards a better life. Rodney was born in California and was raised in a middle-class family. He had everything he needed: a house, food, clothing, and loving parents. However, he began to abuse drugs and alcohol at an early age. When he was only 14 years old, he was already addicted to substances, and he dropped out of school soon after. When he was 18, Rodney got into a fight with his father and left home. He did odd jobs here and there, but they didn't pay enough to keep a roof over his head. So he ended up sleeping in his car. Soon, he lost his job and his car, and then he found himself living on the streets. Luckily, Rodney met a woman named Crystal, who became his girlfriend and gave him a sense of stability. She worked in a diner, and they lived in a small apartment above the shop. But unfortunately, Rodney's problems followed him, and he continued to abuse drugs and alcohol, which caused Crystal to eventually leave him. Around that time, Rodney got into a fight with some other homeless people and lost an eye. After that, he grew a thick beard and started wearing sunglasses to cover up his face. Rodney was too ashamed to look at himself in the mirror. It wasn't until a few years later that he learned to accept his appearance. One day, Rodney was begging by the side of the road when a driver stopped his car and offered him $20 to get a haircut. But Rodney refused because he was afraid that the barber would try to shave off his beard. However, the man insisted and told Rodney that he would wait for him in the car while he got a haircut. But when Rodney came out of the barber shop, he noticed that the man had driven away. He felt betrayed and angry and vowed never to trust anyone again. Some time passed, and one day Rodney was sitting on the sidewalk when a man in a white van pulled up beside him. The man asked him if he wanted anything from the supermarket, and Rodney replied that he would like some water. The man went inside the store and returned with a bottle of water for Rodney. Then he sat down next to him and started talking. The man introduced himself as Joe, and he asked Rodney why he had a thick beard. Rodney responded that he was ashamed of his face and preferred to cover it. Joe understood and said that he had a friend who could help him feel better about himself. Rodney thought it was another trick, but he agreed anyway. Joe took Rodney to a barber shop and explained to the barber that Rodney needed a haircut and that he would wait in the car. As Rodney got a haircut, Joe went to the reception and talked to the barber, promising to pay for the haircut. When Rodney was done, Joe congratulated him and gave him $20. Then he drove him around town to get some new clothes and shoes. Afterwards, he took him to a restaurant and bought him a nice meal. Rodney couldn't believe the kindness shown to him by this stranger. But Joe wasn't done yet. He took Rodney to a motel and paid for him to stay there for a few days. All this time, Joe kept telling Rodney that he believed in him and that he was a good person. For the first time in a long time, Rodney felt hope for his future. The next morning, Joe woke up early and went for a run. He returned home, showered and shaved. Then he went to the kitchen to make breakfast when suddenly he heard gunshots. He ran to the window and saw two men robbing the gas station across the street. Thinking quickly, he grabbed his baseball bat and went outside to confront the robbers. They noticed him, and one of them pointed a gun at him, but Joe didn't back down. Instead, he picked up a piece of concrete and threw it at the robber, hitting him in the head. The other robber joined his friend, and together they fled the scene. Joe had defended himself and his property, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the homeless man he had met the day before. He wondered if the same thing would happen to him. Meanwhile, Rodney was getting ready to leave the motel when he heard the news report about the robbery. Suddenly, he remembered Joe and rushed to his room. But Joe wasn't there anymore. Worried that something might have happened to him, Rodney went to the gas station, but he didn't find Joe anywhere. However, he did notice a homeless man sleeping in front of the store and asked him if he had seen Joe. The homeless man shook his head, but when Rodney mentioned Joe's description, he recognized him. He told Rodney that Joe had gone to the mountains for a while, but he should be back soon. Rodney thanked him and waited for Joe to return. A few hours later, Joe arrived and was surprised to see Rodney waiting for him. Rodney explained that he had heard about the robbery and was worried about him. Joe appreciated Rodney's concern and told him about the homeless man who had witnessed the robbery and given him Joe's message. Joe invited Rodney to go with him to see the mountains and spend a few days together. Rodney accepted the invitation and they set off on their journey. While they were gone, the local newspaper published a story about Joe's heroic actions during the robbery, describing him as a local hero. When Joe and Rodney returned from their trip, Rodney was surprised to see that people recognized Joe and thanked him for his bravery. Joe felt uncomfortable with all the attention and tried to downplay his actions, saying that anyone would have done the same in his situation. In the following weeks, Joe continued to help Rodney reintegrate into society. He encouraged him to apply for a job at the gas station and even offered to lend him some money to buy a car. Rodney was grateful for Joe's generosity, but he was also determined to make something of himself without Joe's help. He landed a job at the gas station and saved money to buy a used car. Eventually, he was able to move into a small apartment and start rebuilding his life. One day, Rodney was working at the gas station when a customer approached him and asked if he was the same Rodney who had been featured in the local newspaper. The customer had seen the article about Joe and wanted to meet the homeless man who had become a local hero. Rodney confirmed that he was the same person, and the customer explained that he wanted to thank Joe for his bravery. He handed Rodney $500 and told him to give it to Joe. Rodney was touched by the customer's generosity and promised to deliver the money personally to Joe. As soon as he finished his shift, Rodney went to Joe's house and knocked on the door. Joe was surprised to see Rodney and even more surprised when he handed him the $500. Rodney explained what the customer had told him, and Joe was moved by the gesture. He thanked the customer for his kindness and accepted the donation. Joe was grateful for Rodney's friendship and support and knew that he had made the right decision by helping him when he did. From that day on, Rodney continued to work hard to rebuild his life, and Joe remained a good friend and mentor to him. Together, they faced the challenges of the future, knowing that they had each other's support and that they had come a long way since they first met.